these students. I see a lot of familiar faces. This is just like regular Sundays. First of all, it seems a little strange, perhaps, to be giving you a welcome at the end of these, not be here Friday morning to properly welcome you. But welcome to Baltimore. So I've been asked to read the statement of purpose, which we read at the beginning of all of our platforms every Sunday. The Baltimore Ethical Society is a humanist religious fellowship inspired by the ideal that the supreme aim of human life is working to create a more humane society. Our faith is in the capacity and responsibility of human beings to act in their personal relationships and in the larger community to create a better world. Our commitment is to the worth and dignity of the individual and to treat each human being as to bring out the best in them. Members join in ethical societies to assist each other in developing ethical ideas and ideals, to celebrate life's joys and support one another through life's crises, to work together to improve the world and the world of our
children. I've been asked to read Adler's words as we do on Sunday morning in Novus. And first I want to say, as in many societies, we use a 20th century translation of Adler's 19th century language. And I need to say that to remind me so that I read it right. As we light the candle, we recall the words of Felix Adler, the founder of the ethical culture movement. The place where people meet to seek the highest is holy ground.
Good morning. I am Dana Cope, a board member at the Washington Ethical Society, where our speaker is also a member. I'm pleased to introduce Hugh Taft-Morales, who is the leader of the Philadelphia Ethical Society and the Baltimore Ethical Society, and also serves as president of the National Leaders Council. I'm excited to hear more about the anti-racist work we are called to do as an integral part of our ethical culture movement.
Good morning. Good morning. In ethical culture, that's this, we have a lot to do, clearly. There are a lot of ways to grow. We support each other through the ups and downs of our lives. But at this moment in history, we are called to confront systemic racism. Michael Eric Dyson used to say that in church, if the sermon ain't making you a little bit uncomfortable, it ain't effective. In his book, Tears We Cannot Stop, A Sermon to White America, Dyson explains, if it doesn't cost you anything, you're not really engaging in change. You're engaging in convenience. You're engaging in the overflow. At our best, ethical culture can do better than that. Racism has infected us all and wounded us all, psychologically and ethically, in manners profound and subtle and obvious and mundane. And we have to transform those wounds into corrective action and redemption. For this transformation to reflect ethical culture values, it must be grounded on loving, candid, respectful, ethical relationships. We know that. This is the heart of ethical culture, after all. Anti-racism work, for us, the salvation is in the relationships. But for this transformation to be effective, it must involve working for transformation simultaneously, internally, institutionally, and nationally. You can't wait for one to do the others. I learned from the context of slave narratives, historical analysis, and stories from people, many in this room, who have been victimized by racism. I learned by stories from Dan Smith, a member of the Washington Ethical Society, whose father was born a slave. Let me repeat that.
whose father was born in slavery. It wasn't that long ago. Don't let him tell you that. Dan shared with my students at my school how racial injustice lives on today, literally embodied in him as it is embodied in many people in this room. He taught me that racism wasn't just my problem. It's historical, it's institutional, it's systemic, and it's my problem. But transformation began for me growing up on a college campus during the Civil Rights Movement. Martin Luther King Jr. was a hero of mine who epitomized Cornell's West reminder that justice is what love looks like in public. So I developed a deep, though naive, yearning to end racism. In my adolescent imagination, I was walking right alongside the icons of the movement, as some of you did in reality. But in this little imaginary experiment, it helped transform the fear and the anger and the ugliness of racism into a righteous indignation. I didn't want to be part of the problem, I wanted to be part of the solution. The day after King was shot, that solution seemed a lot further away. My 5th grade teacher gathered us together for something of a public service announcement. She said, "Be careful going home and over the weekend because the black children are angry. They might take it out on you. Watch where you go in the city." I was confused, sad, scared. My confusion grew only more when in 1969 we moved to Berkeley, California, and I attended 7th grade at Martin Luther King Jr. High School, just renamed in honor of the slain moral leader. There, the color of my skin and the correct assumption of my privilege made me a target. So I was threatened a couple of times, beat up a couple of times, and I felt paralyzed, unable to process it then. I'm not going to go into the details of the inner work that I've done as an adult to try to process those childhood fears and anger. You can do that work, but too often whites get caught up in trying to prove to each other who is more wounded, right? Or maybe trying to prove that you are more multicultural than that. Do the inner work, but connect the inner work to the outer work. You can't retreat and do it alone. And I connected the inner work with my work in studying history. Because history frames our current work. In the words of John Hope Franklin, we must confront our past and see it for what it is. One reviewer said of Franklin, he saw that the past is, not the past was. The past lives on only if we understand and acknowledge this past we grapple with and the conflicts of the present and the promise of the future. End quote. In order to transform, we can't wash our hands of the blood. We can wash our hands of denial, evasion, and amnesia. We can put aside unproductive guilt and get to work. James Baldwin said, "I'm not interested in anybody's guilt. Guilt is a luxury we can no longer afford. I know you didn't do it and I didn't do it either, but I'm responsible for it because I am a man and a citizen of the country, and you are responsible for it too for the very same reason." It's not easy work, of course it's not. Racism is ugly, but we can face the ugliness more fully if we work to transform ourselves as individuals and societies. We use our societies to support our individual transformation, and we use ourselves to change our societies. The ugliness that was described by Martin Luther King from behind the bars of the Birmingham jail, scrawled on the edge of a New York Times newspaper, said that the violence that he was accused of stirring up as he moved through the South, he explained it was already there, underneath the surface described by law and order. Is it described in our ethical societies as what is convenient or what is comfortable? Unpack it down. Violence is in the civic body. King said, quote, "Like a boil that can never be cured so long as it is covered up, but must be opened with all its ugliness, to the natural medicines of air and light, injustice must be exposed." That's when the work really starts. When I ask the question, how can generally majority white communities, which happens to be ethical societies, do authentic, respectful, and effective racial justice work? Recently, I wondered if that was the right question to ask. in contemplating the next step in anti-racism work for dominantly majority white communities, perhaps the answer that I was looking for is stop being dominantly majority white communities. Might we ask not about what we do, but who we are? This existentially institutional question is challenging, I know. Most ethical societies are wrestling with this question in the context of their own strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats. You know that. We make mistakes all the time. We may forget to assure diverse voices on our boards, or on our platform programs, or at our assembly programs. But for those of us who are lucky enough to live in relatively diverse areas of the world, we can begin by just opening our doors and cultivating inclusive organizational cultures. We don't seek justice and social change for people, we seek change with people. That's ethical humanism. At times of uncertainty and weakness, many people in this room, myself included, may think we don't have the resources to repair the harm. But how complex and difficult and how many resources were necessary to create 400 years of systemic oppression based on race? How many resources had to be diverted to enslave our fellow human beings? How many justifications had to be created to make us feel like we could sleep at night? If we can do that for 400 years, we can begin to repair the harm of racism in this country. We cannot retreat from being changed. So to conclude, are we not giving ourselves enough credit as human beings? Can we raise the bar on racial justice? Can we listen and learn from the victims of racism, become more effective accomplices in this work? If we can lead a joyous transformation, we can help become more ethical human beings, more inclusive ethical societies, and more racially just country. Thank you very much.
This morning I am honored to ask you for your money. Many of you were with us yesterday evening as we heard from the teenagers, the high schoolers that form Free Your Voice, high schoolers who live in a neighborhood which is one of the 3 worst air pollutions in the country. I'll say that again, right? Very close to here, 3 worst places for air pollution in the country. Teenagers who organized over a year and more to prevent an incinerator from coming into their neighborhood. They received the Elliott Black Award from this assembly this year, and I know you, perhaps like me, were moved by their presentation, amazed and honored. I had myself wondering what exactly I thought I was doing in high school. And yet I find that their power as young people is so core to who we are as ethical culturists. We know Felix Adler started this movement when he was 24 years old. And so we are a movement above all that gives power and voice to young people, that sees their promise and brings them into leadership. The Elliott Black Award comes with an honor and a plaque, but it doesn't come with a prize of resources. And what I know is that if you, like me, are someone who is relatively economically privileged, if you can walk into a Starbucks and order a latte for yourself when you would like to, then you surely have the resources to be able to give to these young people and to the work that they are doing in their community. I'm gonna walk in this way.